Hey everybody, Jacob back here with you, and I hope you're all staying safe and inside. And with the craziness of the recent pandemic, we've all been hearing a lot of talk recently about how education is transforming and going more and more online, and it's kind of got me thinking about what I consider to be probably the most important skill for not only any musician, but anyone who wants to be successful at anything in life. And that is the ability to find the right teacher for you. This can be a big subject for some of us, and it's not exactly the type of thing that we took a course in or learned about in music schools. And even with the huge explosion of information that's available to us online via courses or YouTube, in many ways this hasn't made the process any easier. In fact, this can lead to a lot of overwhelm and confusion as students chase one clickbait video after another without any real sense of organization or structure that they need to really progress. But no matter what your level of ability or experience is, and no matter how many teachers you've had, I think we can all agree that finding the right one at the right time can make a gigantic impact on your progress. So what I thought I would do today is arm you with some basic principles and evergreen concepts that you can use to find your guru, whether you're looking for someone online or in person. So there's really a few parts to this, right? First, we need to be able to accurately assess our ability level, our learning style, and our specific goals. But before we do that, in this video, I'd like to clear up 3 of the most common fallacies that virtually every student at every ability level falls prey to. Now, these can really cloud your judgment and make it much more likely that you'll wind up with a teacher that isn't the right fit. Fallacy number 1. Choosing a teacher based on their performing ability, or the "my teacher's such an inspirational musician" fallacy. So here's the deal. This is probably the most common mistake students of all genres make when looking for a teacher. And there are a lot of reasons why we make this, but to clear things up right off the bat, there is absolutely no reason to believe that a great player is going to be a great teacher. And to be honest, many reasons to think that they wouldn't be. Now, before you get all riled up, I'm not saying that a great performer can't be a good teacher. I'm just saying that the odds are just as high as the performer also being a great gardener or a great chef. Outside of raw talent, being a great teacher and performer require 2 things: amazing amount of passion and intellectual curiosity, and an incredible amount of time put in honing your craft. In other words, a great performer, even if they have interest in teaching, if they're playing 100 concerts a year, probably hasn't had the time or the experience to actually hone their skills as a teacher or to study the art of teaching. Take my friend Elizabeth, who is a great Suzuki teacher at the Colburn School of Music here in Los Angeles. Now, Elizabeth works with very young students, setting up their bow holes and left hands for hours and hours and hours a day, every day, all week long. And then in the summer, she goes and trains with other people who are even more senior than her in the Suzuki world, relearning how to teach Book 1 and Book 2 over and over and over again. She lives and breathes it. Now, if you think someone teaching at any level, from beginner to advanced students, can just fake that degree of competency and ability, you just don't have very much respect for teaching. It's also helpful here to think about sports. It's commonly known that the top athlete performers in any sport, whether it's soccer, baseball, basketball, often go on to become horrible coaches. I'm a basketball fan myself, having grown up in Kentucky for part of my life, and I can tell you that Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson were awful at coaching. And it makes sense, right, that as a prodigy, it was really difficult for them to relate to problems that just average professionals had. Similarly, if you wanted to become a great swimmer, it would make no sense to seek out prodigy Michael Phelps, who's won God knows how many Olympic gold medals, right? Michael Phelps, every aspect of his body, even the webbing in between his fingers and his frame, were made by evolution to be a great swimmer. You'd be much better off finding someone who is a completely average swimmer and made themselves great through training, practice, and hard work. But some of you may be thinking, Jacob, I want to study classical music or jazz performance at one of those top-flight name-brand conservatories, and they're packed with really famous performers. Surely you must be wrong. We need to unpack this claim by examining what a conservatory or music school actually is and how it works. You see, in almost every case, outside of a few ultra-endowed conservatories that have very fancy names that we all know, virtually all of these schools are businesses. By that I mean they need to make money by attracting top-flight students. The better the students they can attract, the more their own reputation is enhanced, and the business model keeps perpetuating itself. Like any business of this type, their number one job is recruiting, and therefore the faces they want you to see on the brochure are people that are famous, people whose albums you've heard of. In fact, most of these professors are even selected by hiring committees, which at the university level is usually made up of many non-musicians who have almost nothing to judge the competence of this person based on other than their performing resume. Therefore, most of America's major conservatories and music schools are packed with players that have not developed the ability or even the interest to teach at a high level. Instead, most of the major music schools are packed with musical coaches. In other words, people who are competent to teach a very specific piece or give you specific bowing and fingering information, but aren't really going to be able to help you develop much as a musician if you're not a finished product already. And we're going to talk later in this video about how to assess that for yourself. Again, I'm not saying that there aren't any good teachers at the major conservatories. I'm just saying that you'd be much better off looking for that needle in a haystack teacher who's become famous through their teaching without having any big performance career than looking for the opposite. Fallacy number 2, choosing a teacher based on a star student. Growing up in the classical world, after a competition, one of the most common things I would hear is everyone asking who the winner studied with. And of course, at the highest levels of teaching in major conservatories, reputations are made on the prodigious talents of a few of the star pupils that are produced by each teacher. When it comes to star students, correlation often does not equal causation. In other words, by the time you see a star musician in a competition or in an audition, they've often studied with several teachers, the most important of whom are usually the first and second ones that get very little of the credit. As we talked about a minute ago with the business of teaching, the major conservatories are stocked with students chasing the same "my teacher is a famous player" fallacy that we just talked about before. Famous musicians at famous schools have the luxury of being able to choose only the most finished products for their studios. And of course, it's very easy to make the mistake of judging the teacher by the quality of the students they've accepted. And even if several students have done very well with that teacher, there's really no guarantee that they're the right ones for you. Keep in mind, most teachers are not particularly adaptable to your learning style and your needs. So there's much more to this puzzle. We'll talk about that just a little bit later in this video. Of course, what you should be looking for is a teacher who's taken many mediocre students who have then become fantastic players under the tutelage of that teacher during the time they studied with them. Fallacy number 3, choosing a teacher based on their or their school's reputation. Okay, so here's the deal. If you're serious about your music, at whatever level you're currently at, choosing the right teacher is going to be one of the biggest decisions you make. I mean, heck, it's why you're watching this video, right? So treating decisions about your education the same way you would buying a used car is not a very good idea. But Jacob, you may say, what about the awesome students that the major conservatories and jazz schools are producing year after year after year? Well, as I explained a minute ago, you have to begin with the premise that these schools aren't even accepting anyone who isn't already pretty damn good. So I'm not saying that reputation means nothing here. And if we're talking about a brick and mortar conservatory, there's definitely a lot of benefit that you can derive from being around other great players for chamber music and orchestral playing and all of the things. I'm just saying that, like everything else, you need to take reputation with a grain of salt. A big grain of salt. Giant, really large grain. And before we go, I want to throw in a bonus honorable mention fallacy. My teacher is such a nice guy, or I love my teacher fallacy. You would be shocked at how often people fall into this, whether choosing a new teacher or deciding whether to stay with a teacher who isn't quite working out. And I think we can all see the appeal here. I mean, as artists, on some level, all of us are extremely insecure. And feeling as if we're wanted or loved is something that we all crave. So having a teacher that fulfills that for us can be deeply satisfying. Unfortunately, liking your teacher doesn't really have much to do with the quality of education that you're getting. I personally have had the honor of studying with a bunch of teachers, many of whom were famous. And in every case, I was not the top virtuoso hotshot that was going to be able to advance their career or heighten their reputation. In other words, outside of probably 2 teachers I've ever had in my life, none of my other teachers actually cared about me. But this isn't knocking them in any way. I mean, in every case, I can honestly say that my teachers did their best, were professional and courteous, and gave me the best education they could. And I'm so thankful to all of them for that. And in retrospect, this was great for my musical development. I always knew that if I couldn't be the most talented student, I could be the hardest worker to try to get to their level. And it prepared me for the real music world, where every producer or composer I work with on a scoring stage, or professional musicians I'm backing up and touring with, cares first and foremost about my ability to deliver consistently. And yeah, it's really important to be a good hang and not be a jerk that no one wants to hang around with. But my ability to get the job done without needing the people I'm working with to show me love or to feel like they care about me has been really, really important. Now, I would make an exception here for teachers that are working with very, very young students, where having a caring, nurturing, patient teacher can provide some huge benefits in terms of the student feeling comfortable and accountable. But for now, I'm going to assume that most of you watching this video aren't beginners, and if you are, you're not a young child. To keep things as concise as possible, I'm going to leave the second half of this discussion for my next video. But for now, please tip your server by clicking like and subscribe below, and I'll see you next time.